When I was in high school, just, basically yesterday, I went with my family on a cruise. And honestly, I couldn't tell you much about it except for embarrassingly, I remember the food. That was obviously the highlight of the trip for me. I was in my eating prime and I could just eat and eat and eat and eat, enjoy it, because it ends, okay? Maybe we should pray about that. But let's imagine we went on a cruise, and your family shows up, and you are trying to figure out your way, like where you're going, those kinds of things. And you go to the information booth, let's say, right then and there, and you say, "Hey, where's this cruise going?" And they say, "Have you checked out the restaurants here? Top, restaurants you'll have, the best food you'll have." So you go see the restaurants, and they're pretty good. So you go back, you say, "Restaurants were great. Where are we going?" And you say, "You know what? The pools here are amazing. You have not been in a pool like the one on this boat." So you go swimming for a little bit. The pool is incredible. And you go back, you say, "The food was great. The pool is awesome. Where are we going?" Say, "You know what? We have the best shows outside of New York City. Go see the shows. You're going to really enjoy it." And so you do. You go and see the show, and it is great. And you go back and you say, "You know what? I've had the food. I've enjoyed the pool. The shows are awesome. Where are we going?" Ultimately, at the end of the day, we all want to know, where are we going? The amenities are good, but we want to know, where are we going? I want to welcome you to Crosspoint this morning. My name is Kale Courtright, the preaching minister here, and we're talking about some important things last week and this week, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But I want to go ahead and tip my hand a little bit for what's coming next week. Next week, you should come back. This week is great, but next week we're going to start a series on the Sermon on the Mount. It comes from Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5 through 7. As a church, we are immersing ourselves in what we're calling the Jesus way. That we want to live our life according to the way He calls us to live. And so what better place to anchor ourselves than in the Sermon on the Mount? For whatever reason, that's where you have the most red letters in your Bible. That Matthew decided, I can't break any of this up. I can't shorten it. I've got to give them 3 chapters worth of this. And so I've been thinking about some ways that we can really ground ourselves in that story, in those teachings. How we can kind of imprint that on our heart and on our mind. And so next week I'm going to give you a few challenges, but I want to tip my hand to you today. For anyone that will agree to do it, I want to invite you and encourage you, challenge you to memorize the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I don't know why you're laughing, but we're going to be spending about 12 weeks in the sermon, and so you have plenty of time. And you know how I know this? Because if you had been and I was not, but if you were a freshman Bible major at ACU, you would have to memorize the Sermon on the Mount. And you know what freshman Bible majors do at ACU? They wait until the night before, okay? And if they can do it, you can do it. Freshmen in college, they're awesome, but listen, you can do it if they can do it, okay? I believe in you. So I will go ahead and tell you, I'm going to be doing this, and I would love for you to participate with me. Because you have a lot of things in your mind, things that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, you have committed to memory. And I cannot think of a better thing to commit to your memory than the words and the teachings of Jesus. So I want to invite you, I want to challenge you to memorize that along with me. So you can break it down. We'll talk more about that. You don't have to do it all at once, but maybe you want to start today. I don't know. So last year, the theme for our church was love like Jesus. That we said whatever we do in all that we do, we want to love like Jesus, and how we treat one another, and how our posture to the world around us, to our neighbors, everything that we do, we want to be marked by that. And so today we're going to kind of lean into that further, and we've changed it a little bit. But what we're talking about last week and this week is our mission and vision. You hear churches use these words all the time, and they kind of use them interchangeably, but we're talking about mission in terms of this is the unchangeable, non-negotiable mission that has been given to us by Jesus himself. Not just us, but it's what he has given all of his followers. And so we kind of have summed that up to say that our mission is to make and grow disciples of Christ. If you were to ask us, why are these doors open? Why are we here today? Why do we do what we do? And it's because we are here to make and grow disciples of Christ. It's what he has called us to. And so that's what we want to be about. Everything that we do, everything that we are, is about this. Like I said last week, first, we're for making disciples. We are not just for us. We are for those who are not yet here. And we want them to come to know Jesus. But then also for you, we are about helping you grow in your discipleship. That's what we want to have the environment for growth and for formation here. And so sometimes you may go, why are we doing what we're doing? And the hope is that it furthers your discipleship. Ultimately, one of the things that we really want is for you to be a different person next year than you are this year. And not in a New Year's resolution kind of a way where you quit last Friday, but in a way that you say, I want to reorient my life around growing in my discipleship with Christ. And so today, I want to lean into how do we do that? If mission is what we are about, vision is how we will do that. And so we'll get into that today. I have been the preacher here at this church since September of 2023. And so just a little bit over a year. And as soon as I stepped into that role, I started thinking, okay, what are we going to be about? And that's where Love Like Jesus came from last year. Who are we going to be? And, we have been a church, the doors of this church have been opened just short of 13 years. And have been a pretty great 13 years. I've had the privilege of being part of about 9 of those. But everything kind of goes in cycles. And so what I did, I started something that I didn't know what I was doing, but I wanted to to submit it to God to allow him to finish it. And so what I did is, last year about this time, I went to the shepherds here at Crosspoint, and I said, I think it's time for a fresh vision here at Crosspoint. There is nothing new under the sun. Nothing you're going to hear today is, it's like I made it up. Maybe I've repackaged it for 2025. But what we know is that the mission of Jesus has never changed since he gave it, but that we continue to do new things in church. There was a season that I think even this church had a bus ministry. We went and picked up kids. Well, we don't do that anymore. We do other things now. For the record, I wouldn't let you pick up my kids either anymore, So churches have a fresh way of living out the mission of God. So quite simply what I did is I just started praying about it and saying, God, show us who you would have us to be. Show us where we should go. Who are you calling us to be? God has been at work in this area long before we were here. God will be at work in this area long after we are gone. Who is he calling us to be in this season, at this time for us? So what I did is I prayed about it, spent some time about it, and then I eventually went to the staff, and we started working on. I kind of handed the ball off to them, or we started running together, whatever metaphor works here, and we kept working on it last summer. And then eventually at the end of the summer, we went before the shepherds, and I said, this is where I think God is calling us to. So I want to talk with you about that today. One of the things the way that I would sum it up, one of the things I started thinking of is, who will we be in 2030? In 5 years' time, if we're in a room, this room, or one much like it, who will we be in 2030? I know this much, that if you don't eat healthy and you never work out, I know a little bit of what you'll be like in 2030, right? We all do. I mean, you don't have to guess about that. Who are we going to be as disciples in 2030? A little bit, I thought about this, I'll just be honest with you, I thought about it a little bit selfishly. And I started thinking, what kind of church do I want to go to in 2030? More than that, I thought, what kind of church do I want my kids to be a part of in 2030? If we had the time and we went through and we told everyone's testimony here today, if we could give you the mic and say, tell us about your story of faith, how you've been raised in faith, how you have come to faith, I think probably every single person in here, in the telling of their story, would name another person. That as you told your story of how you have faith today, of your spiritual journey, at some point along the way, you would name somebody else. And a lot of times we give those people a name. We talk about the spiritual giants in our life. That's the title we give them. We have come across someone that we would call a spiritual giant, and because of their impact, I am a Christian today. I am a disciple today. Many of you would talk about your parents or your grandparents. You might eventually talk about a neighbor, a friend, somebody who invited you to church, someone who said, join me at Vacation Bible School, or come to camp with me, or whatever. You would name somebody else. And so I just kind of, again, I'm just going to own that this was a little bit selfishly. I was thinking about my kids, and I thought, you know what? I want them to go to church with a bunch of spiritual giants. And for the record, I think that they do already. But I started thinking about those people, the people that we look up to, their faith, the people that we say, if I could have any faith of someone, I would choose that person, you know. I want to be like that person. And so I started thinking, how does a spiritual giant happen? How do they become that way? And what can we do as a church to form a bunch of them? How can we become a church, a body that helps you progress along the way, that helps you become like that spiritual giant? I want us to be the kind of place that's full of spiritual giants. And so quite simply then, how I wrote it, as I wrote it like this, our vision is as a church, we want to be transformed to be like Jesus in our lives and our relationships with one another for the sake of the world. We want to be transformed to be like Jesus in our lives and our relationships with one another for the sake of the world. Or to say it another way, quite simply, we want to live the Jesus way. I want my life to be defined, and when people looked at my life, I want them to say, he lives like Jesus. His life looks a lot like Jesus's. So to ground it in Scripture, then I want to point you to Romans chapter 12 this morning. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2 reads like this. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So Paul here lays out something that I think is very important. And I have preached on this text before, so you know that this is one of those key verses for me, and I'm the preacher here, so you have to listen to it. But you know what? We all have verses like that, verses that have impacted us greatly, and this is one that has impacted me. Paul is saying, therefore, in view of what God has done for you, everything he's been writing up to this point in Romans, in view of everything that God has done, how will you respond to that? How will you respond to what he has done for you? And he says you should offer him everything. Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Turn over your whole self over to him. That's what true and proper worship looks like. But then he kind of gives you a how. What does that look like? And he says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So, you know how sometimes you travel and you stay in a hotel or maybe a friend's house or a family member's house, and the mattress is just different than the one you're used to, and so you probably don't sleep as good, you know what I mean? But sometimes you show up at somebody else's house, or maybe this is how your mattress is, and it's like really plush on top. Have you ever had one? Maybe your house is like this, I don't know. But you lay in it, and it feels really comfortable. Then over the course of time, you have sunk all the way into it, and you can't move anymore. That, I don't even know the right way to say it. The couch or the mattress has conformed to you, or you've conformed to it. I don't know. But it is like the shape of your body, and you can no longer move. You know what I mean? That's what it means, like you conform to it. So we all exist in a culture. And oftentimes we can't even see what it is. We don't even know it until you leave the culture. This is why travel can be important if you have the luxury to do that. But that you exist in a way, and so that the way that you spend your time, it kind of becomes like the culture in which you live. The way that you speak, the words that you use or you don't use, the way that you spend your money, the hobbies that you pick up. I mean, just to put it quite simply, there are a lot of Cowboys fans here. Is it because there's a lot of Cowboys fans or the Cowboys are here? Who knows? It's the culture. We know who you are if you're not a Cowboy fan, right? And so you just kind of become like those people that you spend time with. You don't do it intentionally. You just conform to the pattern of the world. To the way that the world exists around you, you conform to it. I mean, take just language, for instance, that if you were to leave the Dallas-Fort Worth area and transplant to, let's say, Southern California, you would probably start speaking differently. If you went to New York City, you would speak differently. If you went to Alabama, you would speak differently. You know what I'm saying? You start to conform to the way that people live around you. And the problem with our discipleship is you will not drift into it. You will not accidentally become a disciple of Christ. You're going to have to be intentional. Our culture has some good parts, and it has some not so good parts. But regardless, it is not designed for you to become a disciple of Christ. That is not the goal of the culture in which we live. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. So when you don't just trip and fall into being a disciple, oftentimes it's not because you did anything wrong. It's because you never set out to intentionally become a disciple. It's that if you just live the way the world lives, you're going to just live the way the world lives. And the world is not set up for you to become a disciple. So we conform rather than transform. And so the obvious question becomes, how can we be transformed? How can we live this way? How can we live the Jesus way? And what we need is a spiritual formation, a spiritual transformation. And you might just define it for you as the process of being formed into a person of love in Christ. That's who we want to be, is a person of love in Christ. Now, you are being formed, whether on purpose or not on purpose, intentionally or unintentionally. You are being formed by something today. And many of us that were raised in church did have a spiritual formation formula. And if you were raised in church, see if this resonates with you at all. The spiritual formation formula for you was to go to church, to read your Bible and pray every day, and if you're really good, to give some money. Right? That's the spiritual formation formula as it was given to most of us. Now, all of those are good things. You know, I talked about one of those last week, that if you could set one resolution, it was to be here regularly. I think that would change your life. Those are good things, but how many of you have ever thought, I'm going to church regularly, I even read my Bible some, and I pray as much as anybody, and I really don't feel that much different? I've been going to church, I've been doing these few things, and I don't feel like I've actually changed much. And those are all good things, but oftentimes we need more. Rather than just slapping some Christian things on top of our life and not changing anything else, we need to, in some ways, change our life, upend it to live the Jesus way. So what we want to give you going forward is a different way to live, to immerse ourselves in Jesus' teachings, to live by the practices, live the way that Jesus lived, and to do it in the community of Jesus. And all of that through the power of the Holy Spirit. That's the Jesus way. Now, before I get to lay out before you kind of the plan that we have so far, I do want to address one thing. There was a line in that definition that said, for the sake of the world. Now, you heard that last week also. But let me say it again. What we do here isn't just for the people who are here. That your presence here is valued, it is important. Your transformation is of the utmost importance to us. However, what we do here isn't just for here. It's for those who are not yet here. It's the project of faith is to be passed on. It's to take your faith and to pass it to another. Oftentimes that looks like through the next generation, through our children's ministries, our youth ministries, and that's vital. But it's also for our neighbors. After all, Jesus said, go into all the world. Go. And so that's the calling that we want to pick up. We are called to be the light of the world, to be for those who are not yet here. So all that we do is not just for our own sake, but it's also for the sake of the world. Now, as I told you, the staff and I, we started working on this, started looking at what would it look like for us to live this out. How could we become these types of people? And we submitted it to prayer and to petition and essentially said, God, we are counting on you to show us the way. We know that hope is a good place to start, but hope is not a plan. And so here's the plan that we have for it together. We've been talking about how we want to be about discipleship. And so the first thing that we want to do over the next 5 years is we want to train 500 adults in discipleship. That we want to not only give you things to do, but we want to actually give you training. We want to equip you to live this way. Now, a couple of things. We know that right now you might say, there are not 500 adults at this church. I read the back of the bulletin, Kale. That's true. Because again, we're not just for our own self, but we believe that if we are living to the calling that God has for this church, that God will send us people. It's not just about this church growing, but we want to continue to reach those who are not yet here. We also know there's going to be a few things today, that at least 4 that I'm going to ask you to be praying for, and this is one of them. This Thursday, we have a pilot group for this discipleship training is launching this Thursday. We have 10 people from Crosspoint. They're going to be spending the next 8 to 10 weeks or so in this type of training. And I want to ask that you will be praying over that. You will hear stories from them. You will hear what they have been through for when it's your turn to go through. We say we want 500 adults to do this. We're going to keep track. We're going to know who has and has not done this. And so one thing that we know, how many of us ever took a class and the moment that the class ended, you're like, that information is gone. I never need to touch it again. As you know, I have an undergrad in business. I have a whole degree of stuff that I just exited from my memory. What we don't want to happen is to send you through a training and then you just say, check the box, I did it, let's move on. So what we want you to do is we want you to do this in community. So that we know for us to really and actually change, we need people around us. God did not give us just a set of teachings to learn and go through. He gave us a community to be part of. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want you to join a small group here. We want you to get in a group with people that are like-minded. We know that you're becoming like the 5 people you spend time with. And so we want those people to be like-minded, that they want their discipleship to deepen, their love for Christ to deepen and to grow. So we want you to be part of that. So as of today, this church, a church that has an average attendance of about 500, has 13 small groups. And your silence should be because that's a problem. That if we believe in small groups, we should have more of them. And so our goal over the next 5 years is for that number to grow from about 13 small groups to 30 or above. And we want you to be in these groups because we know that's where your actual change is going to happen. When you sit down with the group of people that you trust and love, that you are sharing meals with and praying together, and you say, this is what I want my life to be like, and you allow them to help you grow in that. That's what you need. And so that's one of the hopes that we have, is that that will grow. It's another area for you to pray, because for that to happen, we need more leaders, more people who will actually take on the calling to lead one of our small groups. The next area of impact is that we want to continue to be a church that serves others. As I said to you, God has been at work here for a long time, but that God put us in this area, and I think for a reason, here at I-20 and 360. We care about the whole world. We care about Honduras. We care about Kenya. We care about the whole Metroplex, but we really want to care about this area of the world that God has put us. He's put us right here. This is an area for us to pray, that God would show us how the work that he would have for us. There is a lot of talented and capable individuals here. And we want to be about the same kind of work Jesus was about, that we are bringing real change, a blessing to our world here. And we also know that for your discipleship, for you to deepen and grow, you need to get outside of yourself. You need to serve other people. And so we want to give you opportunities to do that. As I said, one of the things that's most important to us is to pass on our faith, and that includes our next generation. So I sat down with Matt and Savannah, and I said, what would be, not necessarily a reasonable number, but what would be kind of a goal for us, how many adults to serve in our next generation ministries? And they gave me the number 200. Now, many of you have already served in that ministry before. But I'll tell you, we're not at 200 different individuals there. But can you imagine for our kids and for our teens if you would walk alongside them? That not everybody is going to connect with everybody, but our teens may be waiting for you to walk alongside them. Our kids, that you could form a relationship, someone that someday they'll be saying it's because you taught their class, because you got to know them. And so we want you to partner with our youth ministries, our kids ministries. We want those to grow. And because of that, we also, one thing that is near and dear to the heart of our shepherds are your marriages. We want you to be praying over this because we don't know exactly what this looks like yet, but I'll tell you this, that this is one of the things that, again, is near and dear to their heart, that they want to support your marriage. Because we know that strengthening and supporting marriages within this church community will foster healthy relationships and lead to stronger family units. We know that marriage is difficult. We know that you need other people to mentor and to walk alongside you. And so we're not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, but it is a priority for our shepherds to care for your marriages, especially over the next 5 years. And so that is something that they are actively praying over, and I would ask you to pray over too. And lastly, I want to put before you is the idea of hospitality. Hospitality just simply means a place where people that were strangers become friends. And we want Crosspoint to be about hospitality, where not only do our relationships deepen here, but also with the community that surrounds us, with our neighbors. And so we want to continue to deepen our commitment to becoming a place for our community, to foster relationships and, yes, introduce them to Jesus so that we will have spiritual growth for them as well. And so one of the blessings that this church has is a nice facility that lots of people can use. And so, for instance, right now, once a month, we have a Boy Scout troop that uses our church building. Of course, our Celebrate Recovery ministry uses it every week, and we'd like to see more of that, for this to be an open place for people to use. And one area that I would certainly ask you to pray alongside with us is we have a great gift of this facility, and that includes this lawn to the north of us here. This is our property over here. It's a blessing. At this point in time, I don't think we know the answer of what God would have us do with it. And we want to just simply open ourselves up humbly and submit to God and ask him the question, what would you have us do with it? What would you call us to do to make and grow disciples with all that you have given us? And I want to ask that you will pray over that as well. Jesus said in John 15, verse 5, he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Everything that we've talked about, everything that we have considered this morning, we submit to him. That we know over the course of time, plans grow and change, and if they do not bear fruit, we want them to fall away. We also know that if we are not connected to Jesus, none of this will matter. But that is our first priority, is to remain connected with him. When I was growing up, I grew up on a street much like any other. I was lucky to grow up with a lot of other boys about my age. So every day we're out there riding bikes or playing baseball or football or what have you. It's a lot of fun. My parents really had it quite simple because we were just always gone, right? But you know, there were a couple people on our street that didn't fit that mold, that they were, I don't know another way to say it, but a curmudgeon, you know? And there was this one guy's house I remember that you would not even ride your bike on his driveway because of you just didn't want have that wrath. So you just don't go near his house, And so there was an empty lot on our street. And I remember when the sold sign was put on and they started building this house. And then you're going, okay, is there going to be a fun, young family there with people we could be friends with? Or is it going to be a curmudgeon, And wouldn't you know it, but the oldest couple in the neighborhood moved in right there. So I was a little bit nervous, of course. Who are they going to be? Well, they were probably the oldest couple and probably the sweetest couple you'd ever meet. And I think that's the way that life turns out. That we are all on a journey. We are either being transformed or we are conforming. And at some point along the way, we're going to see the fruit of the life that you have lived. You'll either be a sweet older person or you're going to be a curmudgeon. My hope for this group of people is that you will choose to be transformed, that you will let God renew your mind, that he will renew your heart, the way that you live, and that your life will be transformed into a life of his. That someday along the way, someone else is giving a testimony and they name you as a key component of their discipleship. That is our hope for you. As we close today, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room. And we want to continue to be a praying church. We want to pray over all these things we've talked about, but we also know that many of you are walking a difficult road right now. Our promise with you is that you will not walk alone. Is that as a church family, we will walk with you. And so our invitation for you today is to pray with one of these shepherds. And maybe today is the day that you said, I have never accepted an invitation to the family of Jesus. That I have never said, yes, I want to be his disciple. And maybe today is the day that you take him on in baptism. If we can help you with anything, won't you come while we stand and sing?